All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating psychological phenomenon that I can almost guarantee every single one of you has encountered at some point. We're zeroing in on a very specific type of person. You know the exact type I'm talking about, right? The individual who walks into a room projecting this total, unwavering authority and seemingly possessing absolutely zero self-doubt. It's the guy who aggressively mansplains the dinner menu to the waiter. On the surface, they look like the very definition of success, but what is actually going on underneath all that bravado? Well, let's peel back the layers.
So, let's dive right into this. I want you to take a quick second and think about a specific person in your life. Have you ever met someone who speaks as if they are unequivocally, universally right all of the time? Like someone whose loud displays of absolute certainty almost command you to just believe them? And yet, despite that commanding presence, something in your gut tells you that something's off. You might get this sneaking suspicion that their overwhelming confidence is more of a meticulously crafted performance than an actual reality. A lot of times, we just assume they're naturally gifted, or, just naturals at life. But the psychology behind this tells a completely different story.
Which brings us to Section 1, the illusion of total confidence.
To really understand this illusion, we have to look beneath the surface, because what looks like natural, effortless success is often just a really loud display designed to hide the deepest, most profound internal insecurities. You see, real confidence is earned. It's a rock-solid foundation built on experience, learning, and tangible evidence. You know you can do something because, well, you've put in the work and you've seen the actual results. Narcissistic confidence, on the other hand, isn't a foundation at all. It's a shield. It's a hidden internal mechanism used entirely for emotional self-protection.
Moving along to Section 2, shielding the fragile ego.
Think about it this way. When someone hasn't done the heavy, sometimes painfully hard internal work required to build a genuinely strong sense of self, they lack a solid internal anchor. And that leaves them totally exposed. So, to survive in a complex social world, they have to rely on what psychologists call the social mask. This mask is essentially a psychological shield made up of fake confidence. It's carefully worn to project an image of immense value that, deep down, the person doesn't actually believe they have. So why do they wear it? Simply put, because they are terrified. They're using it to protect their ego from the paralyzing fear of being emotionally exposed. Whether they harbor massive insecurities about their intelligence, their physical appearance, or their overall level of success, this mask ensures they are never vulnerable enough to be judged as inadequate by anyone else. Now let's look at Section 3, responsibility avoidance.
So how does this mask actually show up in everyday behavior? Well, usually it happens through an absolute, categorical refusal to take ownership of mistakes. Let's break down the anatomy of how this works in real time. Step 1. A mistake occurs. It's inevitable, right? Everybody makes mistakes. But psychologically, for this specific person, accepting responsibility means confronting deeply uncomfortable truths about their own flaws. And that is just way too painful. So the brain panics and moves directly to Step 2. Blame is immediately shifted. It was bad luck, it was an unreasonable boss, maybe an unsupportive partner. Literally anything but themselves. Which leads right into Step 3. The illusion of a flawless, superior identity remains perfectly intact. By shifting the blame, they are literally editing reality to entirely avoid the pain of self-confrontation.
All right, Section 4, chasing external validation.
Because their internal world is so incredibly fragile and completely disconnected from true self-worth, their sense of value has to come from somewhere else. And dangerously, it becomes tied strictly to external status and visibility. For them, looking successful is heavily prioritized over the quote-unquote boring process of actually becoming skilled. A person with true confidence gets an intrinsic internal reward from mastering a craft. But this personality type often feels very little emotional reward from experiences unless they're being actively seen and praised by others. They just lack a strong internal why. And as a result, they're highly influenced by fleeting social trends, and they desperately need external validation just to prove their own worth to themselves.
And to keep people from noticing this desperate need for validation, they hide their vulnerability right in plain sight. They feign this absolute independence, acting as though they need absolutely no one. They constantly use busyness as a badge of honor to avoid genuine connection, and they maintain strict emotional distance to appear entirely self-sufficient. Because admitting they need love, support, or understanding, that feels like a massive, dangerous vulnerability to them. So they escape emotional discomfort by playing a role where they never, ever have to ask for help, hiding their very real human needs behind a giant brick wall of fake independence.
This takes us to Section 5, the glass ego effect.
So, what exactly happens when this perfectly crafted, highly defended mask is inevitably tested by the outside world? We encounter the fragile nature of their self-image, which is known as the glass ego. Because their confidence is merely a fragile mask and not a solid foundation, it shatters easily. It's like walking on eggshells. Even the smallest, most well-intentioned criticisms trigger an immediate and intense defensive response. This might manifest as explosive anger, extreme defensiveness, or just total emotional withdrawal.
Let's compare the responses here. An emotionally mature person can successfully separate their behavior from their identity. If you critique their work, they don't automatically think you're calling them a worthless human being. But for the narcissistic ego, feedback is a literal existential threat. Their brain is actually hardwired in the state to defensively reject any honest information that doesn't perfectly match its existing, flawless self-image. So honesty from others isn't seen as helpful. It's perceived as an all-out attack.
Finally, Section 6, the truth behind the mask.
So, we've deconstructed the illusion, the avoidance, and the extreme fragility of this specific type of behavior. But what is the actual core truth here? It boils down to this, that booming outward authority is just a mechanism to avoid taking ownership of their life. And once you start recognizing these hidden psychological patterns, it completely changes how you interact with the world. You stop being intimidated by loud bravado. You begin seeing the real truth behind the mask that most people completely overlook. You realize it's not a display of power at all. It's a display of profound protection.
I want to leave you with this final, really powerful thought. The confidence of a narcissist isn't about strength. It's about surviving a deep fear of rejection. Understanding that completely reframes how we view human behavior. It shows us how the small, hidden mechanisms of the mind shape the grand performances of people's lives. So the next time someone tries to overpower a room with absolute certainty, ask yourself, what are they so desperately trying to hide? If you found this breakdown insightful and you want to continue exploring the hidden psychology that shapes our world, be sure to subscribe. We're going to keep bringing you clear, structured explainers just like this one. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.